2021. So why do you hide that from the people of Tobago? Why is that not critical to guiding the way you are budgeting? And not only that, let's be clear, the content of the decline is also significant. Government stone out fell by 7%. Now, government is 46% of the Tobago economy from the output side, and it employs 64% of our paid employees. So, if that is in decline by 7%, what do you think that will mean for the people of Tobago? Agriculture fell by 9.5%. That's 1%. Okay, that's not as big as government, but people will feel it. Construction and quarrying fell by 35%. This is after a year of the THA and Valley fighting with the construction sector. Right? And it's not just the build component of it, the quarrying component fell at the same. So after a year of fighting with them, you have a sector now that is in major crisis. That's 3.4% of our economy. And there are serious people who are working in that sector who will feel the pain, get laid off and stuff like that. Now, the financial sector, this is a huge thing.
Yes.
And real estate fell by 5.1%. This is 27% of the Tobago economy. And this is important because when the economy is in trouble, you have to be looking to the financial sector to provide credit to investors who want to take steps to generate recovery. If the financial sector is in decline, you have to say something in the budget properly about what we have to do to deal with that for the private sector to grow. Finance fell by 5.1%. Why isn't that drawn to the attention of the people of Tobago when you're budgeting for us? So I am very worried about whether this presentation was intended to hoodwink rather than to clarify for people what we're trying to achieve. Do you follow my point?
Yes, but I do want to ask, first of all, you're saying 2%, right? A reduction. Now,
this is by the THA's own data.
Now, some people might say, well, 2% might not be that bad. So I don't know if there's a way you could quickly kind of put it in perspective. Just what does a 2% reduction mean during a time period where the rest of the Caribbean who suffer through COVID, who don't necessarily have oil and gas reserves, granted, we have a complex situation, but the tourist islands of the Caribbean, they were able to experience growth, I believe, in the same period. So what does a 2% reduction mean overall? Because it looks like a small number.
I'll give you the exact meaning when you look in terms of the earnings people generate. The CSO provided me the data on earnings in the Tobago economy. Earnings, when the economy declines, it means wages are going to fall, profits are going to fall, taxes are going to fall, indirect taxes and direct taxes, and so on. So an important piece of evidence that tells you what it means in practical terms for real people is that in Tobago in 2022, real earnings fell by 6.1%. That's wage earnings and so on. And it's distributed unevenly across the population, as you might know. The richer people experience a slower decline. Poor people's income fell by 8.5%. That's people who are in the bottom half of the income distribution. Middle income people in the middle tiers of the income distribution, their income, their earnings fell by 7.7%. So the 2% decline at the level of the economy as a whole is translated into decline in other parts of the economy. And here in the case of earnings, what you're seeing is a major hit in households. So when people are grumbling about Fali's videotape and all that grumbling and disappointment that people are expressing reflects the fact that they're feeling these pains in their pockets and they have to find a way to tell you about it. If you look in the US and you look in Britain and so on, the government's reputation takes a hit when this is happening, right? Fali's rate, I mean, Biden's rating is in the 40s because there is a fall in real income in the US.
Well,
So the Tobagonians are no different. They're going to express it in terms of anger with the government.
Well, now Tobago has a situation that is a bit unique in that it's a budget allocation, at least with regards to the THA's available finances. A lot of it comes allocated from central government, of which technically they got a similar amount to what the previous PNM administration got, but not what Farley Augusta was asking for. To what extent is that a factor with regards to the economic performance? Was Trinidad's interference in any way, did it have a part to play, do you think?
I don't think so. I think this is entirely our own doing here. Let me tell you what you have to pay attention to. If I am the economist reporting the 1.65 billion, one of the things I'll keep an eye on for the country, because the budget of Tobago is not just from the national, it's primarily from the Trinidad. Don't forget that. And you have to look at how the budget performs by itself. The way you look at that, and you compare with Tobago, and you compare Tobago with Trinidad, here's what you look at. We spent 2.4 billion, roughly, in 2022 to produce 1.65 billion. So really what you do is you're operating at a loss. The government of Trinidad and Tobago spent, say, 65 billion. Say 60 billion. That produced 150 billion, right? So that's near 3 times the value of the budget in Trinidad and Tobago, which is produced by the economy. And the government, if it's wise, could interpret that as success. In Tobago, this is a demonstration of failure. Our economy, with the same money that the PNM got in 2021, produces less. Now remember, we removed the PNM because we thought it was poor performance. So fancy footworks should not be used to hide the fact that we have underperformed in 2022 and need to do serious things, develop a major investment program to turn this around. When you look at this budget, you don't see any sign of it. And let me tell you, the economic performance rests on particular pieces of data that Farley ought to have brought to the people of Tobago to explain why he has the budget in a certain way. The jobs in Tobago are mainly elementary jobs. 32% of the jobs in Tobago are elementary occupations. That's messenger, cleaner, and all of that sort of stuff. In Trinidad, that's only 18%. In Trinidad, 18% of the jobs. So you have a problem there. You have to deal with that if you are Tobago. You have to put in a program to create new, better jobs. This is no time to be dealing in political fancy footworks. 62% of the workers in Tobago essentially had no education, at best secondary schooling without passing any subject. That's what you're talking about. 62%. You have to lay out a proper program to deal with that specific type of fact in order to turn this kind of economy around. And let me tell you, the country ought to know, 81% of Tobago is fair labor. 81%. And no better than primary education. So you have to put programs in place to fix those kinds of solve in order that you could get better economic performance. And it is the responsibility of the government not to play politics, but to lay out the facts before the people of Tobago and adduce from those facts the programs that will allow us to move our economy forward and not live in continuous dependence on Port of Spain. This is a state of crisis in Tobago, and especially it's a major crisis for them. So we have to be transparent with them.
Now, the new budget is looking for 4.5 billion allocation, with reoccurring expenditure being 3.4 billion. And one of the things that you pointed out here is, what is the justification for that increase in reoccurring expenditure from 2 billion the year before to 3.4 billion planned, right? And I do have to ask, like, is this even realistic Is there any bad signs? Why is it with recurring expenditure just not necessarily doubling, but increasing by over 50% in the space of year to year?
Exactly. That's the kind of question that you have. That's what you have to explain to the public if you're budgeting. First of all, you were making do on consumption with 2 billion last. 2 billion. Now you find a way to say to the public, I want 3.4 billion. You've got to explain that. You've got to explain what is it about the level of consumption in Tobago and recurrent consumption at that you want to deal with that makes it necessary for us to spend $3.4 billion next year. Is it that you are starting a whole series of investment programs which will have recurrent components that must be added to the budget? And if so, then you have to be very clear about what those investment programs would be. But it doesn't make sense in terms of investment, because all you are proposing for your investment program is 1.15 billion. 1.15 billion cannot have recurrent spending components that will be added to the tune of somewhere near 1.4 billion.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot make any sense. You cannot have the recurrent component of the investment budget bigger than the investment budget itself. It doesn't make any sense. So Farley has to explain to the public, not to a public that he thinks is gullible, but he must remember we're not gullible here in Tobago. You have to explain to the public what this means. It does not make financial and economic sense. And then you have to justify it from another standpoint. You have 1.15 billion for investment and 3.4 billion for recurrent spending. How does that make sense of our economy in the kind of crisis I just described? The economy is in crisis. Clearly, you have to invest big and more than the recurrent spending in order to move this economy. So it makes no sense to spend $3.4 billion on consumption and 1.5 billion on investment when you have a major economic crisis on your hand. And in particular, when a big part of that crisis is the private sector that is underperforming relative to government.
Well, and that point right there, it seems as though development spending, the THA's executive has more or less said that repeatedly. Tobago is in need for development. Tobago is in need of development. In fact, Farley even had a statement before he spoke about the amount of budget allocation he was asking for, where he said, well, look, I understand that some economists don't see the need to start with development spending, even though we don't necessarily have the plans in place. So he's talking about development, but he's also talking about the fact that it seems as though they don't have everything, all of their T's crossed and I's dotted, and their plans cemented with regards to long-term what they're going to do. He wants to start the ball rolling, even though, you know, the initial stages aren't finished yet. Are you concerned that perhaps, well, I'm sure you're disappointed with the budget, but long-term now, is this like a bad sign that the developmental requirements of Tobago will be set behind, not just necessarily with regards to the performance of the economy from 2022 to 2023, but how now the money is going to be spent this year will potentially be so ineffective that you're not necessarily going to meet the gains that the island requires?
I mean, the evidence from last year is that this is a government that clearly doesn't know what it is doing, right? You just made the point that all over the Eastern Caribbean, we're seeing growth.
Yes.
Okay, I am working in the Eastern Caribbean now, so I could tell you you're right, and they're not happy with the getting. But you have a situation in Tobago where output is falling, and the government is telling us that the best way to budget our funds is to spend more on consumption, which will not grow output. Tobago is in need of investment spending to grow productive capacity. And we're spending 1.15 billion on investment spend. and 3.34 on consumption spending. Where is the growth going to come from? What are the growth channels that the consumption spending will activate? The answer to that fundamentally is none. And what this demonstrates is that the chief secretary cannot guide the people in the division of finance to plan properly. And the division of finance really is demonstrating its own inadequacies when it sets up and hands your chief secretary a budget like this to go out there and look bad. So it seems this is just a broad-based demonstration of lack of adequate leadership in the government. The chief secretary is the secretary of everything. You must understand how all the economy works. You must be able to guide the public servants. When Tracy could not guide the public servants properly, we didn't give Tracy a blight. We moved her from office. And this chief secretary is demonstrating the same kind of it. And it would lead ultimately to the people of Tobago removing him from office if this kind of behavior goes on like this. The expectation from this budget that I see is that the losses from last year will go on into next year. The losses from 2022 will go on into 2023, and so on, if they don't change their behavior.
Well, my final question, because I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I have to ask, because this is not the first time you have expressed those sentiments, and I was wondering, because as you said, you all voted out the PNM because you didn't like the job they were doing, right? And now we've reached a point where it seems as though this current administration is operating at a similar level. So is there, or worse, is there an alternative? Because it doesn't seem as though you yourself personally are advocating to go back to the PNM. Is there an alternative, or is it that Tobago needs to now somehow create, as soon as possible, a new alternative?
I think so. I think you have to build something different. You have to, when you're in a state of crisis like Tobago is, you have to discern what your problem is and take action. It is clear that the approach of the PNM creates nothing but bad for Tobago. The approach here and the approach in China. And it is clear for us now, after 18 months of filing, that this is an incompetent bunch that has no clue about where it is going. Now, if you are Tobago and you're faced with that, then you have to sit down and ask yourself, what do we do to find a set of people and a system of government? Because a big part of this problem is the system of government that allows an incompetent government to function, because the legislators cannot control the executive council. So you've got to and get the public involved in the governance process. So you've got to change the system and remove Fally from office and in the process encourage other people to come who are prepared to allow democracy to work so that we can all come together and build a viable economy here. I mean, it's long past time for Tobagonians to start paying their fair share of their way forward. We cannot continue to contribute 20% of the spending by a government that then just spends willingly and produces no serious results year on year on year that moves the Tobago economy towards greater development. That is unacceptable. That is a prescription for slavery.
Well, Dr. James, I don't want to keep you more than we promised you, but I want to thank you very much for the commentary, because I do believe I share some of your concerns with regards to the lack of development and the fact that the missed opportunities time and again, it's not enough to look back with regret when we see the results, and trying to have to dig ourselves out of it is not going to be an easy task.
Right, yeah. As development, as work. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Dr. James.
You're welcome.
Folks, that was Dr. Varnish James, economist and political analyst, and I would say one of the most practical voices with regards to political commentary, and very much appreciative of his own experience and expertise with regards to analysis of the budget. I myself listened to the whole budget, and as someone who's not an economist, I did not take away all of the things that Dr. James took out. I took out a whole set of different things, which I will talk about later on in the show. But I do agree with his sentiment, and I have concerns now because the clock is ticking. The economy waits for no man, and I know a lot of people in Tobago personally who They live there, and they are subject to the performance of the economy there, and that's been going on for quite some time. And my hope and wish was that there would be some light at the end of the tunnel. But folks, let's take a break. When we return, we're going to get into the daily review so that we could review some of the other news. But then also, I have something to point out where me as a communications practitioner, what I observed from the budget presentation. Stay tuned to Talking Point.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, it's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had two properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
Two properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Airing on WESN, the content capital, on Sunday, July 2nd at 8 p.m. Don't you miss it.
Between 2020 and 2022, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service recorded 4,857 reports of domestic violence.
And there was a general figure that 10% of men may be abusers. When we look at the abusers, we found that some of them, it's like a scripted behavior.
Let's say my sister, I suspect she's in an abusive relationship. What are the signs that I need to look out for? Early signs.
What's Up Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Wise insights with regards to Tobago's budget presentation. So we've had our Tobago's talking points at the start of the show, but we still need to carve out some time for our daily review. So first thing on the review today is, well, the NTA has announced that not just that they're working with the UNC, but they're putting up 31 candidates to contest seats in 6 corporations. And the leader of the NTA, Gary Griffith, apparently he's reported to have urged his candidates to lift the bar and show the country what politics is about. Raise the standards. And the campaign manager, Dirk Barnes, he also said that he was surprised at the high caliber of candidates that exhibited their interest in joining the new party, the NTA. Now, a couple of observations from those things. First of all, we always say, and I made this a point yesterday, we vote on party, we don't vote on candidates. So the cynic in me is looking at the situation saying, well, that's nice. You think you have high quality candidates. I don't know if the public will give them a fair shot. The only candidate that really and truly seems to matter is the political leader. And it's almost as though it doesn't really matter who's behind the political leader. For the most part, it's the political leader. That colors the perception of a party. Now, Gary Griffith is a pretty popular fellow. And he successfully lobbied and got the post of Commissioner of Police, of which, at the very least, he was popular in the role, and he managed to change public perception with regards to the police service and how he was running the police. And people seem to have had more confidence in his running of the police and his dealing with the crime situation. One could argue that the statistics didn't necessarily prove that to be true, but perception at times with regards to things like this is almost just as important as reality. The thing is, a lot of his popularity now, we have to ask, does it come from his time working with the People's Partnership, working with the UNC previously? Because now, it's not the entire band, but the band is partially getting back together. And like I said, it's political leaders that voters are the only real candidates voters I feel really keep an eye on. So the head of the UNC, as much as she's not going up for local government elections, still relevant, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, head of the NTA, Gary Griffith. We've seen this pairing before. We've seen this pairing before with the People's Partnership. And it had its eventual untimely end due in no small part to a poor elections campaign. It doesn't seem as though that they're going to make that mistake again. But I am left to wonder, why is this time going to be different than last time? How is this time going to be any better? The one thing, though, is that I do think, or I do wonder, if the UNC just wasn't confident they could get enough candidates. And that's why they were looking to make political alliances. I mean, to be fair, I don't think that either the UNC or the PNM were ready for local government elections to be called anytime soon. It's just that the irony is the UNC were the ones that forced the issue, won the legal case, right, at the Privy Council, and now we have local government elections. So, long run, it's interesting to see what will happen with the NTA. Is this a one-time collaboration? Or is the band really getting back together, in which case the NTA might go the way of the COP, and we'll just be left with the UNC for all practical purposes. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I will leave that for a later date. I want to move on to the next story. And the AG has voiced concerns over the ruling, or a ruling, given by the magistrate that is hearing the matter of extraditing Jack Warner over the larger FIFA situation, of which the Privy Council, I believe, if my memory serves correct, did basically say yes, he could be extradited. And but now Mr. Warner, he has put forward an argument basically to say that he has complained about the fairness of the extradition, and the magistrate has apparently ruled that the questions were not frivolous and vexatious. I guess because this case is so long, so many other matters involved in the FIFA corruption were settled already, and this is still, technically it hasn't even begun. The AG's concern is that, as far as he could tell, he doesn't necessarily want to speak too much in the case, and I would even wonder to what extent should he have a right to speak on a judge's ruling. But he did question the fact that it doesn't seem as though there was any evidence or basis for the judge to rule this way. So now the question is, did Chief Magistrate Maria Busby Earl Carroll, did she do it just based on her insight, based on experience, just based on the argument presented by Mr. Warner's attorneys? Was she influenced by outside commentary, because there's strong commentary about this extradition matter and how Jack Warner is being targeted, and it's only because certain people did not get the rights to those World Cup events, and a lot of international conspiracy going on. At the end of the day, Americans also got arrested, prosecuted, etc., etc. So it is what it is. If he's innocent, he could prove it in a court of law. But at the very least, if we're going to get a ruling that's going to now interdict and delay these matters, according to the AG, if it lacks any sort of substance or foundation behind it, that's interesting. If I was a magistrate overseeing this matter, I would not want to make a potential controversial decision during or overseeing a case that is already controversial. You're just asking for the type of scrutiny that most people don't want to be under. It's not always fair. Even if you're a public figure, it's not what most people sign up for. But it is what it is. This is one more thing that we'll have to keep our eyes on moving forward. Last story, and this one again bothers me. So another 10-year-old has been shot. According to police reports in Carenage, Upper Benedict Street, a 24-year-old driver of a vehicle was shot at by multiple shooters, and a child who lives on the street who was a bystander, so I don't even think the child was in the car. I could be wrong, but I don't believe so. Got hit. Now, we don't have reports with regards to, I don't think, how bad the wound was. The child is not related to the target, but it just goes to show, once again, we can't just say, well, it's criminals committing crimes against other criminals, it's gang members killing gang members. We can't even say now, well, it's gang members shooting at the friends and family of gang members. And the friends and family who may or may not be complicit are now the unintended consequences or collateral damage of gang violence. Now it's unrelated, innocent bystanders. And what gets me is that not only do we have no connection, this is an innocent third party that has nothing to do with what's going on whatsoever. It's also a 10-year-old child. And I don't hear politicians or activists talking about the children in our country who are victims of gun violence. I just don't hear it. So I have to wonder how serious are we with regards to crime. Does that not matter? And we as a society, are we okay with this? I've said it before and I've said it again, and I'll keep asking it. What is going on? Why do I not hear more outcry about children, innocent children, who are victims to gun violence? And now it's not even a child that was in proximity for whatever reason. It's an innocent bystander. The child was just there. Unless perhaps I get more information and I will have to revise that assumption. A resident of the area just gets shot for no good reason. So yeah, that is TNT in a nutshell. You have to be careful wherever you go, because you never know. You don't need to be involved. You don't even need to know anybody involved to be a victim of gang violence now. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get some more into the Tobago budget presentation and my observations, not as an economist. I'm not an economist, and I don't want to compete with Dr. James, but as a media practitioner and someone who knows a thing or two about public communications. We'll get into that and more after this.
people really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, is for all of us in public.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide, Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movie Town, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we want to go back to the Tobago budget presentation that happened just yesterday. And when speaking to Dr. James before our interview on air, he gave me some insights with regards to the main criticisms that he had. And it was interesting because I had similar concerns, but I didn't realize, or I didn't have quite the same concerns, but some of the things that the presentation lacked, or rather some of the things that I thought the presentation had too much of. It made me question things from a different angle. Because whereas Dr. James was noticing the fact that certain analysis of the performance and the growth or lack thereof, and why and how we rectify that was not there, I found that rather than noticing the lack of concrete figures with regards to the economic performance year to year, I noticed that some of the communication that the Chief Secretary had in his presentation, it seemed a bit less about the budget and a bit more about politics, and so much so that the presiding officer actually had to warn the Chief Secretary or caution him a couple of times when he was speaking about the financial audit. It was interesting to watch, but that's not what I want you all to take a listen to. Take a listen now to, well, the Chief Secretary's estimates here as we cue this.
The total estimates of expenditure for fiscal 2024 amount to 4.54 billion, of which recurrent expenditure estimates amount to 3.39 billion, development expenditure estimates to 1.15 billion, URP expenditure to 97.07 million, and CPEP expenditure to 44.77 million. Madam Presiding Officer, using historical trends, our forecast produced a national budget, or produces a national budget of around 65.78 billion for fiscal 2024. So we are forecasting that the national budget will be around 65.78 billion for fiscal 2024. In fact, Madam Presiding Officer, our forecast last year was spot on. Accordingly, the Assembly's total estimated expenditure was predicated on a national budget, or is predicated on a national budget of 65.78 billion for 2024 and a revenue share of 6.9%, in keeping with the upper end of the Dispute Resolution Commission's recommendation, which is at this point the legal requirements of the government. Let me add, Madam Presiding Officer, that the central government nor the Minister of Finance are in need of no other action to be able to give us 6.9%, except to recognize that the Dispute Resolution Commission has already given it. I'll say it one more time. Therefore, Madam Presiding Officer, any attempt to extort Tobago's support for an incomplete legislative arrangement for Tobago's autonomy in order to get 6.9% will be soundly rebuffed. It will appear, Madam Presiding Officer, as if the party in charge in Trinidad likes to extort things from the THA. It is our hope that the Prime Minister will demonstrate this resurged love for Tobago and his sensitivity to the socio-economic realities of the island, and instruct his Minister of Finance to break with the tradition of allocating the THA a customary $4.03 of every $100 spent in Trinidad. $4.03, Madam Presiding Officer, is what they believe we are valued at. $4.03.
So I want to start off there. $4.03 out of every $100. Seems like a little bit, right? Except now we have to ask. Okay, Tobago, an island of tens of thousands of our nation's citizens with a population of approximately 1.4 million, Tobago gets $4.03 out of 100. So there's about $96 left. How much does Toco get? How much does Mayaro get? How much does Separia get? How much does Rio Claro get? How much does Chagaramas get? Chaguanas get? Arima get? And so on and so on. Blanchy Shares, how much does Blanchy Shares get? I believe that's Tunapuna Piaco Regional Corporation. How much do they get out of the $100? Or every $100 that the country spends? That's the first thing we have to ask. We can't just compare, well, you know, it's Tobago compared to Trinidad. To some extent, if we just go by population, not so much land mass, but maybe even land mass when you think about it, right? There are other regions, rural regions, that feel just as forgotten. You know, central government forgets about us. We out here with no roads, bridge collapsing, no infrastructure, no water, you know, electricity. They might be load sharing us more than the capital. There are complaints all around the country for certain things, for a lack of development, for a lack of attention. So is it fair for Tobago to kind of lump now the rest of Trinidad as this one great boogeyman? Well, they get 96 out of 100 and we get 4. Because Tobago, to some extent, when you break the country down, the easiest and obvious way, of course, is to break it between islands. But a more practical way would be to break it up into regions. Regional corporations, municipalities, etc., would be one way to do it. One could argue Tobago has greater advantages than any other municipality or regional corporation. And the amount of money they get technically is greater. Now, to be fair, Tobago has greater needs as a separate island, right? There are greater needs there. So I understand that it's a bit more complicated. But by lumping Trinidad together, and that was just one way that I noticed that the presentation does this a lot. It does a lot of, we are Tobago and they are Trinidad, right? He might not necessarily say that, the Chief Secretary, but a lot of what he says implies that. And I started to wonder, is this, and I don't know if it's intentional, it could be unintentional, it could be subconscious, it could be just, as Dr. James said, and as I've said, and others at this desk have said, and others in the public sphere have said, it seems as though they're neophytes, they're inexperienced, they don't necessarily know what they're doing, and I've already said that communications-wise, it seems as though the Chief Secretary either doesn't know what he's doing, based on how he's communicated over the last couple of crises, or he's getting bad advice. And this now, he comes to the budget where, for all intents and purposes, it's splitting the country into 2 tribes or 2 islands, right? So nationally, we have the issue of race politics, but now more than ever, I'm wondering if Tobago politics is going to be dominated by that division of 1 hour travel time of water, of a 15-minute flight. They are them, we are us, right? The irony, of course, is, as Dr. James implied, the budget seems to be quite similar, at least in potential outcomes, and at least in how it was delivered and the performance of it. It seems maybe it might not be the same or similar, but it's too similar to what the PNM would do. In fact, I found that the presentation was very similar to what I would see in Parliament when the national budget is being presented and how that's being communicated. A lot of political speech and a lot of recurring expenditure, not capital investment. That's one of the things Dr. James had an issue with. In his breakdown, he had recurring expenditure, investment, and then CPEP and URP. I don't know why you're going to break it down quite that way, but it made me think, is this a political campaigning budget? Because one of the issues that I've had here on Talking Point is when politicians want to use recurring expenditure line items, consumption as Dr. James calls it, to pay for things that aren't actually or not necessarily going to contribute as investment to long-term growth. Programs and grants and CPEP and URP that will disperse money into the population, great, wonderful, we have more money in our hands, but it's not in a sustainable way. So more and more, this is looking like the same old politics. Find a way to divide the public, to have your supporters be us, and to have your non-supporters be them. And for the THA, it's somewhat easier. They don't have a Trinidad arm, so it's easy to just say all of Trinidad. PNM Tobago Council can't do that. They have to kind of try to walk that balance, that fine line. But not just now are you going to find a way to separate the nation into tribes so you can have an us against them, but then you're going to do some of the same things budget-wise, communication-wise, messaging-wise, policy-wise, presentation-wise. It seemed more of the same. This is not, as someone who was hoping that this could be the start of a new age of politics in TNT, this looks like it's just, well, the way our history goes, I won't be surprised if they go the way of the COP. Maybe they were a little bit more successful than the COP, but I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps they might go the same way. A flash in the pan and then they disappear. Maybe some Tobagonians like what's happening. But on a practical level, I don't see difference. And if recurring expenditure is going to be enough to get you to vote for them, I mean, they really aren't doing anything different than what we see on a national scale. So it's disappointing to say the least. But especially with regards to, I understand Tobago wants autonomy, and just the relationship obviously is not healthy. It's not working. It's not functional right now. But I don't know if this is the best way to do it. And like what Dr. James said, you can't blame everything on central government, right? So where does Tobago move on from here, and where do we as a nation move on? Because I feel as though there's a bit more separation now between the islands, the rate this is going. We break for news on the hour here on WSN. When we return, we open up the phone lines on Talking Point, where I want to hear from the viewer. You disagree with Dr. James or what I've said, please feel free to call in. This is Talking Point. This is not just about criticizing one side one-sidedly. We want to hear a contrarian opinion so we could have that discussion. Stay tuned, News on the Hour next.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Chinese companies seeking $300 million for halted aluminum plant. Tobago Business Chamber claims Tobago operating on handouts from central government. Young boss sets up GoFundMe for funeral expenses. And internationally, Fox News names Jesse Waters will replace ousted star Tucker Carlson. Now for the details. $300 million US. That's how much a Chinese company is seeking in damages after TNT cancelled plans to complete an aluminum plant here. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, speaking at a PNM convention on Sunday night, said the government is now treating with arbitration, where the Chinese company is now pressing its claim legally for US $300 million after the previous government, the People's Partnership, had put on hold to the multi-million-dollar aluminum complex that would have produced 125,000 tons per year. Prior to the presentation of the budget, head of the Tobago Business Chamber, Martin George, called the THA budget presentation as an illusion, as every year they approach central government with a begging bowl, but are given considerably less than requested and have to make do. He said that what Tobago operates on now are mere handouts by the central government. The chamber head noted this does nothing to encourage self-sustainability of the sister island. George stated that there is no accountability or fiscal management of funds that seems to be required. A well-known social media personality was shot dead while seated in a car in the car park of the Trincity Mall on Saturday, June 24th. The victim has been identified as Kevin Otley, aka Young Boss, and the River Witch, also known as Kevin Solomon and Young Boss. Now, close family have set up a GoFundMe account to offset funeral expenses. On the GoFundMe account reads, "On behalf of the Robertson family, we were granted permission to create this GoFundMe." The statement continues by saying that this heinous act left his 71-year-old mother, family and friends and his beloved Young Nation family in disbelief and tremendous pain. Currently on the GoFundMe account, there's a total of $345 US. Internationally, Fox News has announced that longtime network personality Jesse Waters will replace ousted star Tucker Carlson. The departure of Carlson, the most watched cable news host in U.S. history, had led to a downturn in the channel's primetime ratings. Waters, 44, joined the network as a production assistant in 2002 and has anchored the 7 p.m. time slot since the start of this year. Fox News said in April that it was parting ways with Carlson. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for watching.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there.
Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day.
Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back $3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow name, Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. So now is the time we open the phone line to hear from you, the viewer. Do you disagree with anything that has been said so far on the show? Call in, let us know. Or perhaps we missed something. Call in, let us know. Or perhaps you want to agree. Well, you can call in and let us know. But just a reminder, please keep the calls as succinct as possible. Especially if you have more than one point you want to make, then you need to be faster. And please mute your TV. Listen to your phone when you go live, not your TV. Good morning, Digger Martin, first caller.
Good morning, Sean. Opening the button, Digger Martin in the house.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, the first thing I want to talk about is the Jack Warner issue.
Right.
It is amazing that the AG, the current AG, went to a press conference and he gave one side of the story. The real story is in the Newsday today, where the magistrate said the AG, who is the titular head of the bar and the protector of all citizens, must come to the court with a clean hands. What that tells you, that is a castigation on, it is on the news there. Go and read the article. I mean to say, that is a really damning. So what he wanted really to do is to change the narrative, or put a narrative in front of us that distract from the behavior of the AG in the office. And apparently, I'm reading about it, Jack wanna file affidavit and all kind of thing, and the AG and his office didn't respond again, so I don't know if they had a missing file again. No. The other thing I want to talk about is the word. I'm going to put this word in the public domain again, recusals. And you see all the recusals in cabinet, you have it, the same cultural values in the judiciary now. What that tells us, judges have to recuse themselves left, right, and center. I mean, they say it is really appalling. And the last one, it's going to be facetious. I hear the Prime Minister castigating the West Indies team from losing to the Netherlands. But I will use another word. The West Indies didn't use, they recused themselves from winning against the Netherlands. That's why I want to put recusal in the domain. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Now, I will admit, watching Face of Sports here on WSN, where, you know, I'm not a cricket guy, but I do enjoy watching Andre have Arthur and Lester on his show when they speak about the West Indies. That's a whole other situation, because I don't even know what the governance structure for that is supposed to be. You know, with regards to a national team, the country owns the team. But with regards to a regional team like the West Indies, you know, what is the check and balance to hold the board into account? Doesn't seem as though the board is doing the best job, but I don't know much. We do have a caller from Dabidi. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, pleasant morning. Wonderful program as usual. You see that cricket tournament. I really want to hear nothing about that cricket this morning. I love the interview that you had with our friend from Tobago.
Dr. James.
And he being an economist, a respectable economist, brought about some salient points. Governance in that the theater right now is below. If you look at the number line, you know the number line where you start at 0, they're at about negative something presently. And it seems as though there's a level of ignorance in the THA that the chief sec is not even trying to listen to anybody else, but he's being very arrogant and very disrespectful. So my major comment this morning is that we need to have proper governance in Tobago, or else I don't know how far can it go. So how far can it go? It's going to get it's going to get so terrible that something central government might have to step in. So have a nice day and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, caller. Now, a government is made up of more than just elected officials, right? You have the public service, all the administrator, all the staff. Now, granted, some of the workers or technocrats or technical experts or supervisors, managers, senior government officials that are not elected, there's some turnover, but especially at the staff level, you know, direct staff, personal staff, etc., etc. But it's difficult to remove a public servant in a ministry, much less I would assume the same thing for the individual divisions of the THA. So I do wonder, you know, at the very least we have to consider the question, if we're seeing some of the same issues, how the budget is presented in not necessarily the same way, but similar enough ways, and some of the same type of mistakes. Is it because of the staff at the various divisions? Are they more or less making the same bad decisions, and for whatever reason, the elected officials are going with what they're being told? Now, I don't think so, but I do need to, at the very least, ask the question, consider it, if we're seeing similar mistakes, to what extent does the holdover technical advisors and experts and workers, etc., and staff members and office members and administrators, to what extent does the culture in the non-elected side of the THA government for the island of Tobago have an effect on these policy decisions, like the budget? And we're seeing the effects of that now, and it's unfortunate, because that's a whole other ethical debate on should you just be able to wipe the slate clean and replace everybody, and then you lose continuity, or do you make it extremely difficult to fire anybody, and then you lose the capacity to get rid of people who are potentially underperforming? That's a whole other debate. But it is interesting, an interesting conversation. Now, the first caller did mention the story about the extradition. I understand what you're saying. I believe the AG that the Newsday article is calling out is Faris Awari with regards to the extradition deal, or the basis of the extradition. Now, at the end of the day, if my memory serves correct, the Privy Council did rule. So I'm not too sure to what extent do I now say, do I link the two different things, right? Because one would think that if there was anything wrong with the extradition, the Privy Council would have brought it up. So I don't know how exactly legally, I'm not a lawyer, so this is a bit of a complex case. But to be fair, I'm not sure if it was right for the new current AG to have made that commentary. I don't know to what extent is it playing diplomacy, in an informal angle. We have a caller from Chaguanas, I believe. Good morning, caller.
Morning, sir.
Sorry, San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Morning. That budget that the THA that Sally read yesterday, I listened to him, his lead up to the budget presentation, his preamble, I'll put it that way, in the beginning of the budget presentation. It is not enough just to remove an administration because you don't like them or you find they're underperforming, and to come in there without a plan, because they came in there and the plan was to remove the PNM Tobago Council, full stop. After that, there is absolutely nothing there. And don't think they don't have advisors, Sean. They have advisors. The advisors have been up and down on the media space in Tobago. But those advisors seem to have one narrative. The narrative is autonomy, and I quoted them, and those people down in Trinidad. I still want to know who are those people down in Trinidad, because it seems as if they have decided to demonize the entire Trinidad space, because using their word specifically where they use this word called space. Mm-hmm. So I'll go in their way. It seems as if the entire Trinidad space is being condemned. For what reason, I don't know. It seems as if because some people, like Winford James has said in the past, that Tobago was not how he put it. Tobago never asked to be placed with Trinidad, and I kept saying that decision was not one of the people that are here now. That was a colonial decision, and none of us had anything to do with it. And they need to understand that the most instructive thing that Vanna said in that interview with you there this morning was that there is a situation where you're getting 2 billion dollars, and you're only generating $200 and something million. And that says it all. They need to stop this rubbish about asking for more money just to spend it, and look at developing an economy. Because my thing is this: you get in 2 point whatever billion or 4% of the 4.5% of the economy of the national budget. If you get that 4.5% of the national budget every year, just concentrate on increasing the earnings in Tobago. Just concentrate on that and try to start to move the economy in Tobago forward. Until they do that, Sean, they just spin it up with mud. And just because they're going to shout loud, there is no basis to give them additional monies because they're not doing right with it. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Now, the thing is when you speak to proponents of autonomy, they will talk about the oil and gas fields around Tobago and how much they generate, and that's rightfully Tobago's. That's what they claim. I don't think it's as simple as that, right? But they're claiming revenue. One of the things that the Chief Secretary said, and I don't understand, he mentioned an oil field and how much revenue it could generate, I believe in taxes, but the field is not active yet for generating commercial revenue, so I don't know how that works. Because he claimed 19 billion within the year of 2024. I don't know how that's possible. Maybe I misheard him, or maybe I'm misunderstanding the situation. If anybody knows, please feel free to call in. In the meantime, we have a caller from Tunapuna. Good morning.
Good morning, yes. Hello?
Yes, morning. You're on the air.
Yes. Oh, can I go ahead and make my comment?
Sure, yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Okay, right. Good morning. Good morning. I would just like you to...
Don't listen to the TV. You need to mute your TV.
I would just like you to inquire of Dr. James. What is the... Pardon me?
Yeah.
I have already done that. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes. Yeah, I'd just like to inquire of Dr. Vanos James. What are the implications with respect to the restriction of consumer spending on the employment aspect? In other words, he's saying that there was too much of that at present vis-a-vis development spending. And secondly, in respect to the development aspect, I heard him say that there is a significant amount of lack of expertise or training in Tobago. Again, what implication that has with respect to employment of persons from Tobago in the development aspect of the Tobago development.
All right, thank you, caller. Just want to remind people to be careful and mute your TV because there's a delay between the actual phone conversation and the broadcast. So our previous caller, I assume, was getting confused by that delay and was responding to the television. Now, I could give some basic answers to those questions, especially since this is based off of what Dr. James said at the interview. I think that well, with regards to the lack of education, it's seen by the fact that in Tobago, there seems to be a job market for qualified Trinidadians to go over. And Tobago in the private sector does not have a lot of senior positions, but for whatever reason, for better or worse, it seems as though sometimes Trinidadians are preferred for those positions. And well, the implications of that long term for the island's prosperity, I'll hold off on. I myself am not even totally sure about what they will all be. But we do have a caller from St. James, I believe. Good morning, caller.
Pity Valley, Sean.
Pity Valley, sorry.
Sean, I want to tell San Fernando, if he's listening, he made my point for me, and I want to tell him he's one of the callers I always enjoy listening to.
Caller? I don't know if the caller. Yeah, it seems as though you got cut. If you have more to say and you could call in quick, go ahead and call in. Well, I mean, I made a similar point before, so can't disagree with you there. The unfortunate reality is, though, by pointing it out, ironically, we ourselves are potentially adding fuel to the fire, right? Because we're going against what the Chief Secretary said, and it's difficult to point it out and not make it seem as though we are now Trinidad pointing fingers at Tobago. Well, I would like to say, for those of you in Tobago, I'm not pointing fingers at your entire island. It's the messaging coming out of the political leadership. And in this case, I noticed it, or at least I took note of it with the budget presentation. I'm not too sure if I really noticed it beforehand. But this time, there was a lot of that. And there was a lot of, if you're going to blame central government is not the entirety of Trinidad. When you break it down, approximately 50% of Trinidad disagrees with central government. Doesn't matter who's in power. It's more or less along those lines, right? And I think right now, because we could take the 2 Tobago seats out, it might be neck and neck. I think it would be, what, 19-18? Something like that? Or 17-18? I can't remember what the actual maths is on the majority that the PNM holds. But it's approximately 50% of the country voted against the government, or almost. So around half of Trinidad dislikes the government. So when the Chief Secretary keeps saying, you know, Trinidad, well, the average guy in San Fernando or in La Brea or Point Fortin or Caroni or Sandy Grande, it's not up to him what the budget allocation is. It's not up to him, you know, what the subsidy for the A&C bridge is. It's not up to him if the EMA is going to give you approval or not. He has nothing to do with it. I mean, with regards to the EMA, technically, the central government cannot just waive their process for you, right? So that's one of my issues. Granted, let's be fair. Similar types of communication errors or similar deficiencies of communications have shown up with the public utterances of members of the PNM and the UNC. The difference is a lot of analysts and commentators and columnists, I believe, had higher expectations for the THA executive when they were voted in. So if you want us to judge the THA executive by the same old standards, and to be fair, they've fallen back down to earth where it's still not going to look great. It's not going to look good. GDP of TNT technically grew. So the fact that Tobago is technically shrunk went in the opposite direction, even though the rest of the nation was positive. That's a little bit damning. And it's not as though the PNM administration got a higher budget allocation. And if we just base it off of population, and this might be unfair, because again, Tobago will have unique challenges at other areas of the country. If you cut up Trinidad, it's not going to have quite the same issues. But if we say Tobago is 60%, or 60,000 people, that is approximately 4% of the population. So 4% of the budget by the number of people, which again, it's not really the most accurate way to do it, or the most effective way to do it. But it's not as though it's some way out of bound figure that has no basis. And one of the things I will point out is we have to remember a lot of people are asking the government for money. From the unions to local government corporations to various ministries even, but we don't hear about that because obviously, you know, you don't want potential infighting to get out to the public. The one time in my memory that happened recently when the Minister of Public Utilities and the Minister of Works and Transport started to do the blame game on who was responsible for a certain section of roadway. That ended right quick. The counterpoint was in the media and then they stopped. But a lot of people, Ministry of Education has a hell of a deficit. TNTech is owed a lot of money, right? So it's not as though, for better or worse, it's not as though the Minister of Finance not giving Tobago all of what it wants is some unprecedented situation over the last couple of years. Because we had Mariana Brown basically say that Colin Mimbit would have been probably the only person he could think of that would have been able to control and restrict and contract expenditure in such a fashion. And it wasn't just restricting or contracting the amount of allocation to Tobago. Is it technically right? Do I agree with it? That's a different thing. I'm honestly unsure. I do think that Tobago could use an injection of extra money, and maybe, I think it's reasonable to at least have the discussion about increasing the budget allocation. You don't have to do it every year at 5 or 6%, but, this year, maybe give 5% or 6%. Next year it could go back down. It doesn't have to be maintained, but at the very least, it should be considered, right? Because capital investment will go a long way. And if Tobago's economy could get on a better track, then in the long run, perhaps the allocation could then be more easily maintained with just the 4%. But we don't have a lot of long-term thinking and planning. We just have a lot of short-term, I need to win the election. We see it in central government. I complain about it. Now we're seeing it in THA budget. Arguably, yet again. So, I don't know. If the government gives, central government gives the THA the 4.5 billion that they want, is the items that they're going to spend the money on, can we agree that it's the best way to spend the money? And if we can't be confident that the budget as presented is not the best way to spend the money, can we fault the Minister of Finance for saying, I don't know if I want to give you more than 4% or 4.5 or whatever the percentage is? You see, these are complex things, and usually, you want to know when people are trying to mamagaya? When they give you quick slogans, not a lot of context, quick slogans that easily appeals to your emotion, but the details, they come up short. Because just this alone, the allocation to Tobago is a complex issue that deserves further discussion. But I'm out of time, and I don't want to make the mistake of going over time like I have done over the last couple of weeks, including yesterday. So I want to thank once again Dr. James for being on Zoom on the show. A lot of great insights there. I want to thank all of our callers for calling in. Interesting point about the extradition case. This is Talking Point on WESN. I'll see you tomorrow morning, folks. Make it a great day for yourself. Goodbye.
WESN